Hey everybody, welcome back to the shop. Part 2, the final part of our Arkansas Toothpick build. And this is actually the very first Arkansas Toothpick I've ever made. So there is that. And it's going pretty well so far. It's time to make the guard. What you don't know is that I re-finish ground and re-hand sanded and re-etched the entire blade. So what you're seeing there is not the same blade finish that was in the last video, although it looks almost exactly the same. The reason I did that is because I was not 100% happy with the plunge lines down there, where the guard's going to be. So I retouched those up, and then of course once you put it on the grinder, you have to make sure everything is even and everything. So a lot of extra work that you didn't see because you already saw it the first time. And that actually led to an unexpected issue that I'll talk about in a minute, and that is the location of the plunge lines. So stay tuned for that. Now this brass guard, pretty basic I guess. I will say that when you're doing brass guards or fitting any kind of guard, the thinner your tang is, in a lot of respects, the more difficult the process is because you have much less room to work with. And so if you have a tang that's, 3/16 or wider, and I snapped off the bit there. 3/16 or wider, there's room to get files in there. There's wiggle room. So like right here where I'm trying to carve out this slot here, there's not really room to work with, side to side. Like you've got to get it right down the center. And this tang is about, it's a little over an 1/8 of an inch thick, like 135 thousandths. So that's just something to think about. Now, if your knife design requires a thinner tang, then it is what it is, like in this case. But I could have made this with a thicker tang, but anyway, I digress. Nothing special here, just getting this guard fit to the knife and tapping it down to see where I'm at. And then I decided to go ahead and do a hot fit because this was getting a bit too tedious here. So hot fit, it is what it is. I guess some people don't like to do it. It's definitely effective. Done properly, I think it produces a very decent, very good guard and fit up. So I've got the piece of brass nice and hot with the torch, and you'll notice that I'm heating up the tang right there by the blade with this heat. That's actually not a bad thing, and something I was going to do and did do anyway with the torch later, and that is temper out the tang a little bit more and do a little tip test on the blade. So that's kind of the deal there. Get the bubble of the glob of brass off the back that I started to melt the guard, get that ground off. This is kind of like, at this point in the project, kind of, batten down the hatches and just, forge ahead because, anyway, we got a guard that fits. So what am I doing here? What are those little copper pieces? Very good question. So let's go back to our plunge line dilemma that I mentioned a minute ago. And that is the fact that when I redid the plunge lines, I brought them down too far necessarily because I had to regrind them. But then put the plunge lines below the shoulders that I had ground into the blade. So dumb mistake. And that means if I fit the shoulders of the blade down to the guard, the plunge lines themselves towards the center of the blade are going to be below the slot of the guard, which is, not good. So I could do one of two things. I could either make a ricasso on this blade and fit the guard below the plunge lines, but the Arkansas Toothpick doesn't have a ricasso, so that's not really an option if I'm going to stick with the design. The second option that I thought up is this right here, and here I'm foolishly thinking I can solder without clamping that piece down. Wishful thinking, and it didn't work, but the second option is to create some shoulders or pads or whatever you want to call it here on the guard for for the shoulders of the blade to seat into above the surface of the guard, which is what I'm doing here. So now that I've wised up and used my vice grips and we've got this soldered on, I'm not an expert at soldering, so don't use this as a tutorial. All I know is you get it hot to the melting point of the solder and make sure you have flux on there before and after, as you'll notice I tend to do. And yeah, if it doesn't fall off after you bang it around a little bit, then it's stuck on. That's a terrible tutorial. Anyway, got these things soldered on there. And now we got to do that one. So yeah, this project, I really like how it turned out. We're not to that part of the project yet, but there we go. We've got them both soldered on there. I will say that it's, you know, a couple things here that I had to kind of scratch my head on and get creative. So there we've got our little pads, or whatever you want to call them, soldered on there. And of course that copper being pretty soft, that's going to give us a good surface to seat the shoulders of the blade into. And I purposely, you know, put those in a little closer together so we have a nice tight fit. So I had to file some of that out a little bit, and then you know, tap it down on there with the pipe as well. And it's kind of the same process again, just kind of checking and filing out material. The motif that I'm kind of going for on this project is something that you could actually picture some crusty character on a riverboat packing around. So that's kind of the theme I'm going with on the finish and stuff. So I went ahead and spheroidized the end of the tang, the end of the half of the tang. I can't even talk. The back end of the tang, I don't know, and then tempered it out closer to the knife a little bit more as well. So it's going to be nice and strong. Very tough, not going to break. So kind of experimenting here a little bit with the guard finish. Now I've got it shaped, and put it in the edge there and neutralize it and clean it up, and kind of softens the whole finish a little bit. So just kind of neat there. I ended up going back and buffing it out, but that would, you know, that's one way to do it. And I've got to bring those shoulders up a little tighter, so I can, you know, give myself some clearance for the handle material. But nevertheless, you'll see that there's still plenty of material there at the juncture of the tang and the handle. So using some elk antler for the handle here, which I think fits the overall project nicely. So in this case, I'm just drilling the handle material out with a 3/8 inch drill. So for the most part, it'll just slide right onto the tang, which of course is going to leave voids in there, and we will fill that, essentially bed that with epoxy when we put the handle on. So there's not going to be voids in there, but getting the handle material carved out right where the tang widens there. So it doesn't look right to just put that handle right up against the guard like that. So I need to make a nice little spacer, and it's going to be brass as well, and that will it's going to create a better transition there. So that's going to eliminate any potential gaps where the wider part of the tang meets the narrower part of the handle. And so that's what that washer does as well. There's a very quick flare or widening part. I don't know, it covers that up. So I was working and something was kicking down all these pecans and junk out of the gutter here, which obviously I need to clean out. So I was seeing who the culprit was, and there it is, some kind of little jaybird, I don't know, but there he was up there probably getting bugs or something out of the gutter, kicking everything out down onto my chop saw. Kind of funny. So now I need to shape that spacer that I'm putting on there, and the antler where it comes in to the guard there is not round, so neither is the spacer. I want to kind of match it up more or less equally to the antler itself, which isn't exactly right. It's pretty close to concentric though. So I found a little owl pellet that was up there in the gutter apparently, and this isn't a very big owl pellet. I don't know what kind of owl it is. Back at the old home state, we had like northern pygmy owls, which were tiny little owls, pretty cool. Definitely not that here. I don't know what that one was, but anyway, we've got this. We had more than just northern pygmy owls, all kinds of owls. Anyway, we got this guard and this spacer and everything all kind of fit pretty close together here, and it's time to clean things up and buff it up before putting it all together. At least the parts that I won't be able to access once the knife is put together. So cleaning up the guard here on the buffer, and yeah, so I am polishing up a rough, scratched up surface. I think I like how it came out. And then of course the portions of the antler that are going to be right up against the guard or the spacer there. So here I'm putting the final finish on the blade, and this is a hand rubbed finish on this blade because, you know, as you can see, most of the blade is a mono steel instead of Damascus or pattern welded, and so I have to put that finish on there, and it's all sanded down to 1,000 grit, but there's some scuffs and things like that, and so getting that grit, those little tiny scratches is what they are, all running in the same direction. Right here I'm just getting out some scuffs there or whatever towards by the plunge lines, but get that all uniform, and then draw the blade across the sandpaper evenly without picking it up. This is one way, typically the way that I use to get a hand rub finish on my blades, and it was a little more difficult with a double-edged blade with 4 facets, but that's pretty effective. I use WD-40 when I do that. It gives a nice final cut on the sandpaper. I use ammonia or window cleaner when I'm just hand sanding. I don't use WD-40 then. So as you can see, fill up the voids with the epoxy and wait for the bubbles to come up. So it took, you know, a good 5 or 10 minutes to get that filled up. Now here the epoxy is set up to where it's not going to run at all, but it's not fully cured, so it's still quite pliable. And I'm just peening that tang down, and I also use the center punch to really spread that. And I went until the handle would not move, and that's not the epoxy holding it at this point, it's the actual tang. And so once the epoxy sets up and it is here, obviously, then we've got a very strong, secure handle construction. So get that butt cap shaped, and I had to go back a couple times and take some more material off the antler and the butt cap to get what I wanted on this final handle design. So I kind of like how, you know, grinding away on the side of the antler, it's not perfectly round and straight, and I didn't get the hole perfectly round and straight in there either, or perfectly straight, but it kind of accents the bark, or the natural surface on the antler if with between the dark and the light color. So I like how it turned out. So putting the edge on this thing, that's when the blade really starts to look like a blade, and some hand sharpening here as well, and of course going through all the stones and getting it shaving sharp. So there it is. One thing I forgot to do in the video here is put my maker's mark on it, which I will do that before I send it off to its new home. But there it is. I really like how it turned out. And this was one of those projects where several unexpected things came up, and I kind of had to think on my feet a little more than usual, but I really like how it turned out. I think it's nicely balanced. The blade is not too heavy. It's gonna be a fast blade. Definitely stabby and slicey for sure. So pretty cool. You can see the weld line there. And the reason you can see the weld line coming off of that Damascus core is because the decarburized steel is lighter colored than or is a different color than our high carbon steel. So you can see that weld line there because there's different carbon content through there just because of the decarb on the steel when we had that opened up. Anyway, that's it, guys. I appreciate you watching as always, and we'll see you on the next video.